Good day to you, dear friends. I hope you are well and that you will continue to be well. And you will be well because all of this is good, and it will be good. Now, I am often criticized for being, considering everything happening in the world and the universe, a great optimist. Although it's not like I'm trying to justify myself. It's not a bad thing to be an optimist. You are an optimist. Even pessimists in their own way are also optimists. It all depends on what someone hopes for, or more precisely what someone wants. That brings us to what we've always emphasized, that intentions are important. It depends on what your intentions are. And let us remind ourselves, it's been a decade since we started our gatherings with what I said. As I mentioned, depending on your attitude toward the best of all possible worlds, this present one, whatever it may be, however the situation may seem to you, if you are not satisfied for whatever reason, be it aesthetic, ethical, or ethnic, with the current world, feel free to be an optimist. As we've said before, be an optimist. All of this will collapse. Now, what is optimism, what is realism, and what is reality? In the meantime and now, I leave that up to you. Everything is important, dear friends. It's really about what you want. No matter how it may seem, and no matter how many different events, all that noise, the clamor coming from all sides of the world, essentially, this moment is not just good, it is magnificent. Now I will try to demonstrate this in the most efficient way possible. I hope that over all these years, we have managed to entrust this successfully as much as we have worked on it. This is a magnificent moment. This is actually the moment in which everything is essential. It is when you let go of your everyday existence, a person finds themselves in a situation where in fact everything depends on them, even more precisely than what they want, than what they desire. Of course, what they desire does not include the idea that Santa Claus will bring it, obviously, but rather it's about what one wants and is ready to work for, including, if necessary, making sacrifices. Therefore, if someone knows what they want, this is the best possible moment. We will demonstrate this very efficiently now. Whatever is filmed in Disneyland and presented, those are all distractions, no matter how this may sound. And as much as on many issues it may even seem morbid to use only distractions. Because this is the crucial moment. This is actually the crucial moment, because now everything depends on the question of what you want, or even more precisely what you want and what you are willing to do. Maybe you have already been working on this and you are doing a great job. Therefore, let go of optimism and pessimism. Let go of reality. What matters is what each person wants. And now, just briefly to go back, so it doesn't seem like we're being destructive. No one is happy about someone else's downfall, except for someone who is twisted. If someone is twisted, why shouldn't they fail? Of course, it's legitimate that some people consider what is twisted not to be twisted at all, and let them deal with it as they will. With the development of the situation, they'll handle it however they can. However, if, for example, we manage, let's be precise, how much do you want to live as free people, in a community of free people, in a free country that makes decisions about what it does and how it does it, without external and foreign influences, without foreign investors? Good luck to them. Without foreign workers, good luck to them. So, it's legitimate for someone to want all that and not be able to do without it. It's legitimate. But surely it's also legitimate for someone to want imports. Someone, even if it's just one person, that's legitimate too, and there are actually more of them. And of course, in order to understand the context of the play, the best of all possible worlds, where all of that has to, you know how a play is directed, in which you are, especially when you play around with that system of units, juggling it like that, anything is possible. Old ladies and frogs are jumping around, apples and pears too, so you have to pick, subtract, and see what's happening. No, this is a great moment. A moment where, depending on what you want, you move forward. Or you stay in Disneyland, which is now already Zombieland. And it's precisely this moment that explains all the possible noise, confusion, and distractions coming from the world. It has to be done. Now, this might come across as overly confident when someone talks like this, maybe even offensive, perhaps even arrogant. However, it's not. It's simply together. We just have to return to the basic setup. Because don't forget, The world up until now has been organized as a world of comparative subjects. This was not only officially explained, but also applied. And that world of comparative advantages dragged along with it a certain set of organisms. Not just the world, but let me point out, the way the world is organized is the same way every individual community, every member, element, and subscope of that world is organized, including how it organizes itself. When you talk about the changing context of international exchange, don't forget this very important thing. We've talked about this before, and I apologize that in the past few months we haven't reminded you of it sooner, but I'm sure you have thought about it yourselves. If the context, the structure, whatever it is changing, especially if the current international exchange is being completely disrupted, what does that mean for many other things? What does that mean? Well, it means that the international division of labor is also being abolished. And here, dear friends, is where the real chaos begins. That's why our neighbor Donald has to do everything he's been doing for the past 10 years this way, and everyone around him does the same. And not just in the US, but everywhere. Especially from the perspective of my world, which claimed to be optimally organized on the best, most logical, healthiest, most market-oriented, and as you recall, all sorts of other principles. This isn't something you can just easily explain to the audience. That, in fact, things can or must be done differently, and of course to explain that this new way is even better. So we don't need anyone to explain to us what is better. International division of labor, whatever that means, I'll quickly give you a few short, clear, and, as I like to say, illustrative examples. So let's just briefly stay on this topic a bit longer. This is that moment, and this is the moment where everyone... Now, the members of the older generations have the unique opportunity to really reflect on whether what they've been doing so far actually makes sense in the long run. Should they continue with it or not, or do something entirely and fundamentally different, maybe even the exact opposite, or perhaps simply choose not to work at all anymore? And especially from the perspective of young people, whatever young means, a person is young as long as they feel young. As for me, I can't seem to remember that feeling anymore, so I can't really judge. This is the best possible thing that could have happened. Now, of course, it all depends on how much they will understand and take advantage of it. Of course, if they let someone from Disneyland, it doesn't matter if it's the former or the future one, explain things to them, then whatever happens, happens. But if they know what they want and how to achieve it, then this is the best thing that could have happened. No matter how it may look, I hope it's clear to see. This show and the flag are here just to help, if possible. I'm just saying, if it's useful to anyone, I hope it happens that it shows and helps you a little. So, why is this a good thing? Let's first go back a bit to that international exchange. And now it doesn't matter who expected what, negotiations, ceasefires, wars, trade wars, all sorts of things. Let's attempt to accomplish this task in a brief and highly efficient manner. Anyone who remembers and who was in our country, how long ago was it? 6 years ago, and exactly in April, maybe that's a coincidence or maybe it isn't. When plans are made, you never know. Maybe someone is just copy-pasting, or maybe they're writing something based on some other parameter. In March, or rather April, when the situation escalated, in 2020, do you remember what happened then? That's when the global lockdown hadn't yet started in full force. It had started even before that, but at that point it had already reached the final phase of the beginning and the initial phase of implementation. Do you remember the negative oil prices? Then how did we explain what that means? Then what is that supposed to mean? And when it happened, you'll remember that even then our colleague Donald was at home bragging about how that OPEC plus agreement and deal, thanks to him, was made between 20 oil-producing countries, not all of which were even OPEC members. He boasted about the fact that, for example, the President of the United States, a country where for decades the procedure to adopt it has never been completed, there is a law that targets the OPEC or OPEC plus organization itself. Accordingly, it is treated as cartel organization with elements of terrorism, and that law has never been adopted. But, as they say, nominally, this excludes the possibility for the United States to officially, especially with the entire cartel, well, with some individually, maybe with some they can, with others they might make some deals, but not officially, as our colleague used to say, the same, the same, the same. Interestingly, both then and in the meantime, he rarely mentioned it, only occasionally remembering to boast about something. And I apologize if this might sound inappropriate or in poor taste, but even I called that agreement historic, both then and in the meantime. And now anyway, let's get back to the present moment. And let me tell you something, no matter how it might seem to you, wars, piracy, all sorts of things, blockades, whatever comes after the world, which at that time was the negative price of oil, which defined and explained much of what was happening in the world in that exchange, in the global economy, with all the implications it has both for the world and for any individual country, of course. In these current days, something quite significant is also happening across the United States that, when judged by its specific parameters, is either considered nominally negative or potentially positive. Now, I don't know what first came to your mind, whether it's negative. Many things can be perceived as negative or described as negative, and they are negative. Choose for yourself. It's legitimate, not just in the context of everyday thinking. However, over there, it's about the fact that the price of natural gas is negative. That same gas, let's remind ourselves, without which those who rely on it can't do without, right? The one that, due to various circumstances, wars, blockades, sanctions, is extremely scarce and in high demand by many, especially those energy vampires who have gotten used to it, mainly the highly developed countries in what was the world until now, those who, in the world as it was, did a lot, so to speak. Just to make this story clearer, why we are now talking about the aftermath of the war and the negative price. So what exactly does a negative price mean in this context? Essentially, it means that natural gas is being actively exploited or produced, you can choose whichever word you prefer, at a much higher rate than the actual rate at which it is being consumed further down the line. For example, this often happens in places like Texas, or when it is being loaded onto massive ships to be sent to markets all around the world. To put it quite simply, the producer is eventually forced to pay those who have the available capacity, whether that involves pipelines or other specialized facilities, to literally take and store what has already been produced. This unusual situation occurs because stopping production is often more expensive than paying someone to take the gas away. Frankly, the whole thing seems a bit illogical, considering how big the story is. This brings us back to the topic of narratives, especially those in the energy sector, because this is a story that spans decades. All of these narratives need to be handled with special care about that gas that supposedly everyone has, everyone wants, and the question is whether there will be enough of it. Then there will be, then it will come from here, then from there, then it arrives from the American ace, and as you can see, there is gas. Just to remind you, according to the model, you know how much there will be, right? Even over there, in the very heart of the United States, they timidly ask and raise the question of how much there will actually be at all. But whatever the case, right now there is gas, and lo and behold, nobody wants it. They can't, they mustn't, they don't need it, or whatever the reason may be. This, of course, can be explained in various ways, in all sorts of situations. There are many ways to explain it. By the way, let me point out, pay attention to how rarely this is even mentioned anywhere. And you have to admit it's interesting, considering the overall narratives and all the events currently unfolding at various points on this planet. However, whatever the case may be, this situation suggests that everything is flooded. And that, as not only we, but others as well, announced and made public a few days ago, the cinematic world has begun. Now, maybe we are subjective, since we've been announcing it for a long time. That is, it's already here, yes. In the world we live in today, such a situation can happen for a variety of different reasons, rather than just one single factor. First of all, the structure of exchange payments, for example, the needs, what one side knows and what the other needs more, also within their means. If someone doesn't have the money to pay for what, for example, the other side is offering and selling, specifically gas, how they will pay for it doesn't matter now, nor at what price they will pay. You see, when someone over there is ready to sell it, yesterday, for example, at one point, the negative price was $10 per million British thermal units. That comes out to approximately, though it's not exactly the same, it depends on the quality of the gas, about 1,000 cubic feet. That's about 30 cubic meters of gas. And now the one who produces it, who stores it, had to pay about $10. This morning, I think they have to pay around $2 instead of selling it for an amount that used to be in the tens of dollars, often even more. Then now think about how that fits into the context of current international trade, payments, consumption, the organization of the economy, economic activity. The word escapes me, it's growing. You know how much people talked about it, but it doesn't grow endlessly. Imagine how that's possible, especially in a situation where you can hardly find it anywhere else. What does that say and what does it show? These are exactly the places where you can best see the devil's handiwork. What did we say? There's always some kind of plan or protection team there that can write up some numbers. How much is oil, gold, or anything else nominally worth? However, on the ground itself, especially where someone is forced to pay, and especially when it comes to the most important things, that tells you best what the situation is, what time it is, what the current moment is. That's what does it for us. From that old world, from that old global economy, international exchange and distribution, let's not forget that term, there's nothing left anymore. Accordingly, from that previous international distribution of labor, you can count on the fact that there's nothing left anymore. How does it go? Only the buttons are left. The question here is whether even the buttons will remain in that crematorium. A long time ago, at least 30 years, if not more, when the euphoria around the then current process of globalization was in full swing, if I remember correctly the term itself, well, globalization is always a process. Ever since the world began, there has always been globalization, and there always will be. The only question is how someone implements it and what it actually means. What it means to whom, according to what rules it is organized, whether there are rules or not. In the end, there is always that fundamental rule, the rule of the stronger, and so on and so forth. It mostly goes back to the 90s. Now, I found it interesting. So, it's not about me, but just to remind you, that's all. When you already had certain questions or dilemmas from before, though more or less you no longer even have questions or dilemmas, you have opinions. And now those, as they say, don't exactly align with reality. What a shame for reality, that's how it is. I had the opportunity, I read a few analyses that, at that moment, to be honest, on one hand gave me a sense of security, and on the other hand made me rethink all the equations from scratch. And what's it is quite interesting. I think one of those specific reports was even a detailed study conducted by the World Bank, or perhaps one of their many specialized agencies, or it might have been a major project they actually financed. It was especially strange because at that time in that world, when the world was becoming more connected, opening up with exchanges, free movement of capital, people, goods, just remembering how everything was, someone, and not just someone from the margins, or someone idle fantasizing about fairy tales and fables, but someone from within the very system itself. Imagine that, huh? Maybe he remembered a dream, maybe he was tasked with analyzing the future of international trade or exchange. And where, I would say, I even think there wasn't even a specific term for it back then, at that time when. It's not exactly like the way it starts in the opening crawl of Star Wars, you know, a long time ago in a galaxy, somewhere far, far away, but it is rather set at some point in the distant, unknown future. For example, international exchange and trade will probably drop by 90%. Depending on what exactly it's about, but 90% is no small thing, really. As a matter of fact, in several other studies, a very comparable percentage appeared regarding, for example, exactly how much maritime transport will begin to decline at some point in the future. Now, I'm not sure if those percentages are accurate or if that will actually happen. However, let's get back to the main point. If we move away from the system of comparative advantages and international exchange as it is set up toward a system of creating self-sustaining communities into something that, let me remind you, was also popular about 6 years ago, the system will always tell you what needs to be done. On one hand, they are extremely principled people, but the audience is the way it is. So whatever they don't like, they just forget about. On the other hand, there's the circular economy and many other things. However, anyone may perceive it. In my opinion, I don't even know who they are, what they are, why they do what they do, or what their intentions are, while I know what mine are. Someone tried to explain it relatively correctly. Although now, moving from the system of comparative advantages and the world set up in that way, with organized international division of labor and organization of work, because the division of labor implies the organization of work as well as the conjuncture and structure of society, we are shifting towards self-sufficiency, then everything up to the current figures, and not just the figures, but the entire current structure, conjuncture, organization, well, to put it diplomatically, all become questionable. Or to be realistic, there's nothing questionable about it at all. In short, say goodbye to everything up until now, depending on what your attitude has been towards everything so far. It also depends on how you will approach what is coming.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And now for something completely different.
Now, when it comes to the topic of international exchange and distribution, it's something that has even been discussed and explained, even explained relatively correctly. When I say correctly, I mean within the parameters that someone set and within those boundaries. The topic of the international division of labor is not a pleasant one. Let me say right away, it's not pleasant, which is why in recent decades that term has almost disappeared. It used to be used often, very often, even predominantly, not for explaining international relations and circumstances, but precisely for the more important organization and structuring of any individual community. That's why people were reluctant to talk about the international division of labor. The idea that there is an international division and allocation of labor implies that someone else has decided what you are going to do. And then that undermined the idea of the Snow White, the free world, in which all nations are free. And so it doesn't really work when you try to explain to people that they are free and can do whatever they want, while someone has already decided what they are going to do. It doesn't matter whether it's someone from the outside, but also from the inside as well. A world of freedom, a world of freedom. Look, we've created a free world, and now you're all free to do what we've decided to do. Know that the logic is like that, and if that's the case, then it's someone who is designing the world of freedom. And especially this gives enormous room for maneuver to whoever is playing the role of the teacher, in, for example, such a classroom with such children or such an audience. Because then you can always criticize them. Why? Because they're not good at something, or they don't do certain things at all, or they don't know how to do it, or they fail to do it, even though you were actually the one who set what works and what doesn't work for them. And now, in this international division of labor, if someone decides what someone else is going to do, that also means the other person has to accept that they're going to do it. Maybe someone accepted it on your behalf without you even knowing, for example, yes. Maybe someone decided over there that, for example, in the international division of labor, someone should be smuggling, for instance. Anything from cigarettes to various psychoactive substances. And so you are considered suitable for that, and you're not fit for some other kind of work, so you go ahead and do that. And you do it. Or, for example, someone decides, what are you going to do there? Well, you can work in tourism, serve when all sorts of people come, you serve them, charge them for something, you have jobs. And you take on those jobs that someone assigned to you, or maybe you even applied for them yourself. There's no need to judge anyone for that, really. There's no need to judge. Maybe in some cases they decided for themselves. That happens too. In fact, that's often the case. For example, some people like to work and they've decided, we want to work, we want to produce something. And someone says, All right, if you like to work and produce, we'll make it possible for you. They'll provide you with energy, gas will come, oil will come, all sorts of other things will come. They'll make it possible for workers to come too if there aren't enough workers. They'll bring you back to our moment. And that's generally how the structure and conjuncture of each individual community is formed. Let's not list how many there are now from one end of this playground to the other. And whether you admit it or not, if you were in charge or if you were running the world, you wouldn't do things much differently. You have to create such an organization. The only question is, what is nominal, how you will explain it, and you would probably explain it the same way they do, that the world is free and that everyone does what they want. And then everyone faces the consequences. That is the key thing. Who is ultimately responsible and who is ultimately paid? And for that, it's best if everyone is responsible. Which, again, I must point out, is not far from the truth. If you have accepted, like entering into a marriage, both sides are responsible. But when they said, I do, it doesn't matter how they got to that point. Or maybe it does matter. Maybe someone was even forced to say, I do. Basically, when your place is assigned to you in the International Division of Labor, according to your affinities, qualities, abilities, and of course, according to the needs of the global conjuncture and market, then a complete Disneyland is created, a complete conjuncture. Because, for example, in order for all of this to fit together into a whole performance, for instance, if someone has decided that you should smuggle something over there, and at the same time you need to be some kind of Disneyland state, or bring back that Disneyland term, nation building, then you need all sorts of accompanying content. So whatever fits its purpose in the International Division of Labor, someone gets it. They always get that accompanying part, both hardware and software. There are even academics to explain that what you ended up with is the best possible outcome. Not only is it not necessary, but it's not even given. God forbid something else or someone else's should happen. It has to be exactly like this. There are dedicated cultural professionals and creative artistic workers who are supposed to entertain the audience. Furthermore, there are a wide variety of metaphorical fig leaves meant to provide cover for certain negative aspects that might quickly surface. Consequently, your misdeed is that your workplace, in the best possible way, is deeply and fundamentally questionable as to whether it will ever truly yield any of the beneficial and constructive long-term results you had originally hoped for. Okay, we decided to do this, or someone assigned us to do this, and now on various conveyor belts we see that this, either for us as a society or individually, doesn't lead to a happier state or a state we're satisfied with. Maybe it leads us to a worse state. Maybe it leads us to a state where we don't stop, where our culture, our civilization, doesn't stop. What would that mean? No, that's where you need those fig leaves, those hypnotists. That's where you need Disneyland. Disneyland is stuck there. That's its God. You also need priests to explain that God gave it, that it can't be otherwise. That's God's will. And you need everything else too. That's your holy conjuncture, structure, the best formation of Disneyland. It was. Now a new one is being made. Of course, now AI and technical progress will help here, but that's what it is. That's what it is. In short, it's all one and the same. What's important? The only thing that matters is what you want. Don't let anyone fool you into thinking something else is important. What matters is what you want. And of course, detach yourself from this and the old world. Someone else will. No one else will. What you want, can do, know, are able to do, and are ready to do yourself. Whatever this yourself means, being with yourself and with the people around you now. Everything else is a distraction. Whatever else they record these days, months and years ahead of us, however it reaches the audience, in whatever ways, even if it sounds tragic to some, that's what it is. The specific actions you intend to take, and of course whether you choose to do it first within your own immediate and close-knit local community, how it is carefully structured, systematically organized, exchanged, and eventually distributed, well, of course, that reality will inevitably continue to exist in some form. Forget about those 90%, because many things will probably fall into that 90%. Don't let that scare you. There will always be some international differences, one way or another, even if things are smuggled across the border. That's just how it is. That's diversity. It all depends on who is the one declaring what the rules are and who decides what is according to the rules and what is not. However, that's someone else again. What matters is what you have decided. Of course, the system that exists for the sake of control won't say it like that. It won't promote it that way. And it's understandable, don't get me wrong. I'm not justifying the order or the post-order hiding there. Someone has to do it, and it's not easy for them either, regardless. But that's beside the point. What matters is how you feel and what you have decided, what you want. What you know and what you are persistent about. How did you explain that? Just define for yourself what is unacceptable to you. Also, it's implied that you have probably already defined, or if you haven't, you can define during the same process what is acceptable to you. And that's it. Everything else is a performance. Everything else is Disneyland. No matter how they present it or explain Disneyland. And now you see that you don't stay there for long. You see that here and there someone tries to explain it to the audience in our way. However, no one really puts in much effort, honestly. That could be because some are lazy, or it could be for that reason, but it could also be because they know what the audience is like. The audience doesn't like that, so let's make them angry. Someone tells the audience here and there what's happening and what will happen. Some, however, don't say anything at all. Some say everything is great and it will be just like it was, and it will be even better, and so on. Occasionally, someone comes out and makes a statement. Here we have the British Prime Minister as well, in an interview the day before yesterday. It wasn't as detailed as my namesake, who acts in Serbia, the one on television, but he told the audience enough so that they would slowly get used to the idea that someone had taken away Santa Claus. As one dear friend and colleague paraphrased Revici, perhaps it's a bit tasteless, but it's very useful and precise. You know, I myself have forgotten the pastor. I think we even sent it once in a certain context when he was describing that period of dictatorship in Germany in the 1930s. In those years, and he says, first they took these people away, then they took those, and well, first they took away Santa Claus. And then Mr. Kirchsteiner very hesitantly and cautiously suggested that, just to start things off with, maybe they should all try to get used to the idea of not going away on any vacation at all this year, not for the summer season, and not for the winter season either. This year, next year, and so on and so on. And there's a bit more to it. Of course, someone slips this in, and then it's back to business as usual, carefree and cheerful. However they want over there, let them film however they want. Let them film however they please. Everyone does their own job. They work within the framework of the international division. And of course, I'll mention once again, within the division and organization, they work in any community, no matter how big or small it may be. Division of labor. You decide what you'll do and how you'll organize it and how you'll divide it up. And that's the whole story. Oh, right, I said we'd come back to this important point. Numerous disturbances that are present, regardless of how anyone explains them, regardless of how the causes of those disturbances are explained, or the reasons they appeared, their intensity, especially their duration, how long they will last or whether they will pass and how they will pass. They clearly show that the previous structure of exchange no longer exists and will not exist anymore. Of exchange and distribution. Among other things that this implies, it was necessary here to briefly return to the current division of labor in order to understand why this future one will not have that credit element which enabled those deficits, the functioning through deficits, whether trade deficits as a community or budget deficits within the community. And that someone else will not be able to solve numerous issues, so because of that, if you can, if you are able, if you know how, and if you are willing, you will have to organize yourselves. When you look at how someone has set the standards now, and they've set them properly, we've been trying to explain for decades the exchange and breakdown of energy, resources, the impact on that and production. You can clearly see that even regardless of how someone sets up their accounting and monetary system, and how the reconstruction of the international or any level of the monetary system goes, you actually don't have the option for anyone to credit anyone else. Not only in international exchange, but even in the exchange and breakdown within any community. Because it was easy to create the best possible world, especially when you were on the other side and could just create some money, print it, create, as they used to say, aggregate demand, and then when you aggregate it, if there is enough aggregate demand, then you have those on the other side who provide what is needed. Some provide energy, others provide resources. There are those who want to work and process it. There are those who want to transport it. And as long as no one stops them in the meantime, ships go, trucks go, planes go, and there are those who want to consume it. That's how it works. In the international division of labor up until now, there has also been a category called the international division of non-work. Because in the current system, precisely because of this, as long as it functioned this way, and as long as it could take resources, primarily energy, from certain points where there was as much as needed, depending on how many times you hit enter on the other side to print money, you could finance whatever was going on over there. There was no collateral. Because moving forward, if you are someone, just to take a look, to go back to those energy vampires, we won't list them all, you know who they are, but let's say some of them maybe even got counted in. Now, moving forward, some countries like Japan or Germany, for example, of course, they're not the only ones. But like the most efficient ones, at least in the world so far, have been the showcased industries. And now he gets energy, whether it's from the Russians and their neighbors or from elsewhere. He sources various other resources from the ends of the earth. The American military is there to beat up anyone who tries to stop that. The Federal Reserve is there to print as much money as needed, officially and unofficially. Now, why should he care, even if he sold goods to someone on credit somewhere? It's not his energy, it's someone else's, which he paid for with little pieces of paper. The resources aren't his either, they're someone else's, which he paid for with little pieces of paper. Even those little pieces of paper aren't his. All he cares about is having as much turnover as possible. Let's bring in millions, even tens of millions more workers if needed. Or let's raise the level of technical and technological equipment we have so we can produce more. Just so the output would be greater, no matter how this may seem. Of course, no one ever described it this way, but think about it and remember if this is actually how it worked. Ultimately, even the one who prints the paper, the money, or hits enter, as we've explained. And he doesn't care as long as he's the one finishing it, as long as he controls who it is. It might spill somewhere along the way. The important thing is that he decides when it spills. And of course, no matter how much spills, the least of it is his, if any of it is his at all. And why would Sonia play the studio? From this construction up to the present world, you should understand that a change in the context of the international division of labor, along with many other things, when viewed from the perspective of self-sufficiency, call it a circular economy or whatever you like, or especially from the perspective of geonomics, what is in the material, or more precisely, if we focus only on energy and not go further into resources. What limits you, what actually determines your purchasing power to pay for something now or later. And from every perspective, it becomes crystal clear that it will not be a matter of will, whether someone wants to lend to someone else. No. No, this will become a question of who has the energy to be able to share it with others. Whoever has the energy to share with others can then perhaps also share various products with others. But why would he share various products with others, especially if they don't have something he needs? Because after all, what guarantee is there that those others who don't have their own energy and resources will be able to produce it themselves tomorrow? In short, this also eliminates the layer that, in the previous system and its setup, made sense to create, no matter how illogical it may have seemed. The consumer layer. I should note, I am talking about consumers in those systems that did not create. We are all those consumers. Everyone is a consumer. However, as we have explained, the construction up to the present best of all possible worlds, and the reason why it appealed to such a large number of people, because it enabled and qualified people to be consumers without being producers. Well, this new world Just imagine for yourselves, compared to the old one, what it will be like. Not because I regret it, but because that's the logic. Or maybe it just seems that way to me. Check for yourselves. Everything in its own way, dear friends. All of this, as I said, not only is it good, all of this is excellent. If you want even more than this, yes, it depends on you. It depends on what you want, you know, what you can do, what you're allowed to do, what's denied to you, how persistent you are, and how hard you're willing to work to achieve it. Everything else is just a distraction, obstacles along the way. So now see what you'll do, how you'll do it, and with whom you'll do it. And into the future, because those are the words of the future. Whatever kind of future may have seemed to anyone. And that's a good thing. Do you want more?
Ladies and gentlemen,
And now for something completely different.